Welcome to Beyond Borders, the Immigration Evaluation Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Mariella Shibley, and this is where we simplify the process of immigration evaluations into clear, actionable steps. If you're a psychologist, therapist, or social worker wanting to add this life-changing service to your practice, hit that follow button and let's jump in. Hi, everyone. Welcome back. So today I want to talk about something that not a lot of people get to experience, which is what it's actually like to go into a detention center to conduct a psychological evaluation. But before we get into that, let's start with why a mental health provider would even be asked to do that in the first place. So most of the ones that I've done in the past have been for asylum cases, specifically defensive asylum, which means that the person is applying for humanitarian relief as a defense against deportation. Now, I've also done many cases where I'm evaluating someone in removal proceedings for other reasons, and that can include showing evidence of rehabilitation or demonstrating that they're not mentally or emotionally able to withstand continued detention or something along those lines. And that's a little different from what most of us are used to, where we're typically evaluating the qualifying relative of the person in removal proceedings. In these cases, we're actually evaluating the respondent directly. Oh, and one more reason that you might be asked to go to a detention center is to evaluate for competency. So I'll probably do a whole episode on this later, but just so that you have the context, competency in immigration court means basically determining whether the person understands the nature of the proceedings and can meaningfully participate in their defense. So if the judge is concerned that the respondent may not be able to understand what's going on because of mental illness or cognitive issues or anything else, they can request a competency evaluation. So that's another situation where a mental health provider might be brought in. So now I want to talk about what it's actually like to go into a detention center and do this kind of work. First of all, people in detention centers are not necessarily criminals. Okay, that's a big misconception, especially now. If you're asked to go to a detention center for an immigration evaluation, again, it's usually for an asylum case or for cancellation or removal. And in those cases, you're evaluating the respondent, the immigrant. Now, as with any other evaluation, it's really important to be clear about what the referral question is, exactly what you're there to evaluate. Because every case is different, especially those that require that you go to a detention center, because that means that case is most likely being tried in immigration court. So you might be assessing credibility in an asylum case or evaluating, like I said, how detention is affecting the client, or it could be to evaluate rehabilitation potential in a cancellation of removal case or competency or many other issues. So you definitely want to be on the same page with the attorney about what you're being asked to do. This is one of those cases where you're likely to speak with the attorney beforehand. So take advantage of that and ask all the questions that you need to clarify the task. Also because you need to know what to bring with you, because you're not in your office and you can grab any test you want if you're thinking of administering some tests. Now, every detention center has its own rules. So your first step should always be to call and ask what their specific procedures are for letting a mental health professional come in to conduct an evaluation. Some places require a court order, which may sound like a hassle, but usually isn't, because we're obviously not the ones in charge of that, right? The attorney is. So you just call the attorney and let them know that detention center requires a court order, and the attorney will just take care of it. And then they'll either send it to you or send it directly to the detention center. I always like to have a copy and I bring it with me just in case, because things get lost all the time. Now, most detention centers actually do not require a court order, but some do. So it's important to ask. Now, other places may not need a court order, but will want a letter from the attorney on their letterhead requesting that they allow you to see their client. Now, this is very important. You're not going to use the same room that friends or family use when they visit. Those rooms usually have a glass partition or a telephone setup, and that's just not going to work for an evaluation. Plus, you're around other people.
So you'll need what's called a contact room. And that's a room with a table and chairs where you sit in the same space as the person you're evaluating, and it's just the two of you in the room. Now, again, these people are not criminals, so don't feel worried about sitting in the same room with them. Now, with that said, one thing that I learned early on in doing forensic work is to always sit near the door, and ideally with nothing between you and the exit. It's just a precaution, in case something were to go wrong. So you want to be the one closest to the door. But again, to be honest, in most of these immigration evaluations, there's no reason to be concerned. It's just a good habit. Okay, so back to logistics. You'll need to ask the detention center what their specific requirements are. So as I mentioned, it might be a court order, might be a letter from the attorney, or it might just be booking the appointment ahead of time. Now, some places require an appointment and some others don't. Some centers also require clearance, which typically gets renewed every 6 months or so. So for clearance, you usually just fill out a form and then you send in a copy of your driver's license. And then they just run it through whatever system like FBI or whatever. And then once you're cleared, you're good to go. Some centers don't allow electronics at all. Others do, but they might need you to fill out a special form to bring in your laptop or iPad, or it might need to be mentioned in the attorney's letter if they require a letter from an attorney to let you in. So be sure to ask about that too. So you want to say that you're wanting to bring a laptop or whatever electronic you use, and what should you do in order to be allowed to do that. And you want to make sure that when you're arranging your visit, again, you ask for a contact room. That's the room you want, the one where you're alone with the client and there are no other people around.
Loving this episode? I've got something to make your life even easier. Grab my free introductory guide to immigration evaluations linked in the description box. It's a game changer for ensuring your reports meet legal standards. Let me know what you think.
Now, I want to stress that most, if not all places, do not allow you to bring your cell phone. And even if you're allowed to bring in your laptop, just know that you will not have internet access. So plan ahead. And also bring your charger, because even though not every room has an outlet, some do. So it's worth having your charger just in case, but definitely charge your laptop in full. You could have a little checklist if you're doing this, often. And that's one of those things that you would put, make sure my computer is charged fully or I'm bringing my charger, that type of stuff. Now, it has happened a couple times that I had to do the evaluation through that glass with a little slit at the bottom. That's actually only happened in criminal defense cases, not immigration one, but it could happen. So again, just be ready to adjust if needed. Most detention centers don't allow food or drinks. So if you want to bring water, make sure to ask when you book the appointment if that's okay. Also, I said no cell phones are allowed. Most places have lockers outside where you can leave your phone and anything else that you don't want to bring in. Usually you just give them your ID and they give you a key, or sometimes the lockers have combination locks. Also, use the bathroom before you go in. Evaluations take time, and in some places it's kind of a hassle to leave the room and use the restroom because you might need to be escorted there and back. So better to be prepared. When you arrive, typically you go through a metal detector. Some places make you take your shoes off. And when you call ahead, ask them if there's anything that you're not allowed to bring in and whether there's anything unique to their place. For example, clothing colors. Ask if there's any clothing colors that are off limits. Yeah, that's a real thing. So the reason I know this is because one time I showed up in a khaki colored sweater and they wouldn't let me in because it matched the color of the inmate uniforms. So I had to call my assistant to come and switch tops with me because I had already cleared my morning and I didn't want to reschedule. And then another time I had a button-down shirt that was just very slightly sheer, but I had an undershirt and they wouldn't let me in. So the warden's secretary actually came in and she let me her cardigan. Now, of course, the security guy's shirt was also see-through and you could see his undershirt, but, apparently that was fine. With that said, most of the staff are nice, but sometimes people can get a little power happy. So don't let it get to you. let them go on their little power trip. You're just there to do your job and then leave. And so you want to make sure that you can leave. So don't argue with anyone. Don't piss anybody off. Now, when it comes to testing, if you're administering something long, like the PAI or the MMPI, you're going to be sitting there while they do it. So I usually just start working on my report while they're taking the test. Typically, you can't leave them alone with the test, although I did do that one time, but it was a unique situation where I was evaluating 2 people at the same time. So I had one taking the test while I did the interview for the other in another room, and that's the only time that I've done it. Also, don't expect anything nice when it comes to furniture. These rooms are not comfortable. Also, you don't know what kind of temperature there's going to be, so you want to dress in layers. It can be either freezing or super hot. I always bring a scarf that I can throw on if it's cold, and I dress in layers, like wearing like a little cardigan that I can take off if it's warm. Just make sure that your top isn't see-through, and don't wear anything, strappy. Just dress professionally, but also comfortably. I've seen some surprising outfits from attorneys and interpreters also. Speaking of interpreters, if you're using one, that's something that the attorney should help coordinate. I haven't personally gone into a detention center with an interpreter, so I can't speak to that from experience, but I assume that it's probably a similar clearance process. I've also done a few evaluations virtually, though not for immigration cases. But usually the attorney and the detention center coordinate everything, so you don't have to figure out the logistics yourself. They'll just send you a link, you log in, and you just conduct the evaluation through their platform. It's definitely not ideal. The connection can be spotty, you don't get the same sense of the person, and you lose a lot of the nuance that comes with being in the room together. But in some situations, it's better than nothing, especially if getting into the facility is difficult or would take a long time. So just be prepared to adapt a bit. Maybe give yourself a little extra time, of course, in case tech issues come up. Another thing, bring business cards. So some detention centers have waiting rooms that are often full of attorneys. So while you're waiting to be taken in, it's a great chance to network. Nothing pushy, just be ready in case the opportunity presents itself. This is usually the case in immigration detention centers. Now, you probably won't be allowed to walk around the center alone. Usually, you'll just be escorted. And just to be clear, it's not like the movies where you're walking past these barred cells with people yelling at you. That's just Hollywood. In real life, you walk through typically long, empty corridors. You go through a bunch of heavy doors, most of which open with a buzzer. Sometimes you just have to ring the button and then wait and wait and wait. And you think they don't know you're there, but they do. And you just wait until they buzz you in. I often feel like it's the opening scene of Get Smart. I don't know if you remember that show. I'm aging myself. Anyway, also be flexible and allow plenty of time for the evaluation. So things don't always go as planned. Sometimes there's a drill. Actually, that happened to me last week. Or inmate count. So during count, everything stops. No one moves, and you just have to sit and wait. So it might help to ask ahead of time what time count usually happens, because it's typically a few times a day. And if your evaluation is scheduled during that window, it could delay things significantly. So just know going in that stuff like that happens, and you might have to wait longer than expected. So I typically clear an entire day for when I go to a detention center, or at the very least, a good 5-hour block, like an entire morning or so. All right, so I think that pretty much covers it. Hopefully this gives you a solid idea of what to expect when you're doing an evaluation in a detention center. It's not glamorous, but it's important work. So let me just go over the most important takeaways. People in detention centers are not necessarily criminals. You're usually there for an asylum case or cancellation of removal. Always clarify the referral question with the attorney. Every case is different. Call the detention center ahead of time. Ask what they require to let you in. A court order, a letter from the attorney, on the attorney's letterhead, an appointment, what? Some centers require clearance, so be prepared to submit ID and to fill out forms. This may need to be renewed every 6 months. Also, when you schedule the visit, ask for a contact room, not the regular visitor room. You need to be in the same room as the client, and make sure that you do that when you're scheduling the visit, that you're requesting that. There are typically just a few of these rooms, and they get booked. So you definitely don't want to show up without making sure that they have one reserved for you. Check ahead of time for rules about clothing colors, electronics, food, etc. Most places do not allow cell phones, and even if you bring a laptop, there's no internet. Come prepared for any possible temperature. Don't expect nice furniture or quiet conditions. Do the best with what you have. Use the bathroom before you go in. Some places make it difficult to come and go. You'll go through metal detectors. Sometimes they make you take off your shoes. You'll be escorted most of the time. If you're alone and come to a door, push the buzzer and just wait to be let in. Oh, also, I didn't mention this. Bring tissues. These evaluations can get emotional. So I always bring a little box of tissues with me. And bring business cards. You might be sitting in a waiting room full of attorneys, and it's a great time to network a little bit. So I think that sums it up. Thanks for listening. I hope that this helps you feel a little more prepared if you ever find yourself heading into a detention center. If you have any other questions, feel free to reach out via email or leaving comments in these platforms. I'll see you next time.
That's a wrap up for today. If you enjoyed this episode, share it with a fellow mental health provider who needs to hear it. And if you haven't already, hit subscribe so you don't miss my next episode.